I'm Nathaniel, and today we will now do a book review. Today we are now going to review Conway's Game of Life, Mathematics and Construction by Dave Green and Nathaniel Johnston. So Conway's Game of Life, this is a very interesting book talking about, well, something called Conway's Game of Life. It's basically a zero-player game, meaning that you just put in all the initial conditions and let the computer figure out the rest. Before we get into the actual book, we have to figure out what actually is Conway's Game of Life. What's the point of reading something if you don't know what it is? So, this Conway's Game of Life takes place on an infinite square grid. It's obvious because you see all the squares there. That's the infinite square grid. And it also comes in discrete time steps, unlike our actual world. So each cell has two states, 0 or 1. Again, highly oversimplified one of our natural world, but still good enough, as we will see later. A cell with state 0 turns into state 1 if there are 3 cells with state 1 around it. The second rule is a cell with state 1 stays in state 1 if there are 2 or 3 cells with state 1 around it. And surprisingly, this strikes a balance between stability, chaoticity, and simplicity. The rules are simple to describe, yet it is quite a stable rule and is also very chaotic. So this book comes in 3 parts. Part 1 talks about classical topics. So it's basically a whole recap section. Anybody came into the Conway Life community for a while and doesn't know what happened. And part 2 is about circuitry and logic. And so basically it covers how many ways you can put 2 of these gliders, basically 5-cell objects, together using the period 30 gospel glider gun, which shoots out gliders at every 30 time steps, and period 46 twin beast gun, which basically spits out gliders every 46 time steps. And obviously part 3, now we know what to do now, is we had to cover how to build giant patterns. Yes, patterns with more than 1 million cells have actually been constructed. And these are usually spaceships, really big ones called macro spaceships, and large emulators. And if you're wondering what an emulator is, it is a pattern which can imitate the behavior of other cellular automata. Let's talk about simple objects. The first 7 are called still lifes, and they are objects which do not change, which are called the block, tub, boat, ship, beehive, loaf, and pond. The oscillator is objects which change periodically. If you can think of it this way, a still life is an oscillator of period 1. A blinker is object number 8. Their other oscillators include the toad, pulsar, octagon 2, and pentadecathlon. And octagon 2 is actually my favorite oscillator in Conway's Game of Life. Just a bit of trivia. Spaceships are objects which predictably move across the plane. So the glider is object 9, and it travels down 1 cell by 1 cell, basically diagonally, every 4 time steps. I might think that's quite predictable, right? Wrong. Because as you will see later, there are a lot of spaceships which we have discovered, and mostly found by computer search. We'll see later. Let's talk about sequences, which are small objects which converge or explode or evolve, and it's called, to a very common formation of objects. The most common of which is called the traffic light, and it creates 4 blinkers. And the starting pattern there is called the T tetromino because if you turn it around, it looks like a T. A honey farm is made out of 4 beehives, and I'm sorry you can't see it, but just to tell you that from generation 5 onwards, generation 7 onwards, it has square symmetry, so you don't have to worry. It's just, symmetry issues. Anyways, I'm just telling you that this will take 19 generations to stabilize. And if you want to see an even smaller pattern with an even greater potential, turn to Methuselah's small but long-living patterns. Examples include the R pentomino and pi heptomino. There are several other heptominos which fit this pattern are tongue twisters, like the B, C, E, F, I heptominos, as well as the Herschel, which was one of the first patterns to be discovered and also one of the most useful. So how do we make more still lives based on the 7 being already seen? So still lives can be made by combining more still lives. So for example, another still life is called the ether, and it consists of 3 cells in the L formation as well as a tail which is called the L tetromino. So if you can combine 2 ethers together, you will see that we can actually make the left called an integral sign and or the right called an 11er. Both preserve their eating properties of gliders. And they can also eat other spaceships as well, making it probably one of the most powerful tools in Conway's Game of Life. So, infinite families include these still lives, which you might call them a homologous series, homage to organic chemistry, and they're called the tub barge, long barge, etc. Long barge, long barge, and then you have boat and ship families, which also continue indefinitely. What about making more oscillators? Obviously, it's harder than still lives because unlike still lives, oscillators will always have a few cells sticking out a bit, and having cells being born or died, but still lives, everything's just stationary, so you just have to do the mathematics on every cell. So one simple method of creating oscillators, which was discovered very early on, is called using induction coils. And basically these consist of small still lives or small not so still lives, like a few generations later on the bihepterminal, right? So using these induction coils, we can stabilize a small box to form many oscillators. Like the three you can see here are called the Hertz oscillator, the negentropy, and cauldron. Try discovering more billiard tables if you wish. Oh, by the way, there are only 2 oscillator periods not being discovered. All the rest have been. So obviously, somebody has discovered a method to make the larger oscillators, but the 2 periods that haven't been found are period 19 and period 41. So if anybody can find a period 19 or 41 oscillator, then that will provide us with a great step forward in Conway's Game of Life. You see how which software are used so that you can create these oscillators by yourself, or at least you can try. What about spaceships? Well, obviously, since spaceships are oscillators which literally move, it's even harder to come up with spaceships than oscillators. But it's facilitated by computer search, fortunately. And here are all the speeds, or at least some of the more notable speeds we can find. Like the LWSS here is the lightweight spaceship. There's the Loafer, the Weekender, the Soba, Copperhead, Caterpillar, Silverfish, and several other spaceships. You can try figuring this out by yourself, or you could download some software from LiveWiki or whatever, or create your own software to find new spaceships. And what about glider syntheses? Well, these are basically all the many ways you can smush gliders together from far away. So this is how you actually use this glider logic. So you can basically use some of the more nothing collisions, the more bland collisions which don't form anything, and there are all the results you see here that you can create from just 2 gliders. So we make objects using gliders, and this becomes very useful, and even if you can construct a Gosper glider or a twin bees gun using a glider rake, which is a spaceship which spits out gliders, then you could build the first breeder, which was basically the first breeder ever created. Now, what about reflectors? If you want to reflect the glider or the glider signal, well, you need to use reflectors, and there are so many of them that you can't count. Usually they involve an oscillator called a sparker, and they do not affect the oscillator but can potentially reflect the glider. And stable reflectors are very hard to find, and the smallest known is called the snark. It's fun. It's quite a fun thing to do. Now, what about circuitry? So, using all these reflectors and several other glider collisions and glider guns, we can build a universal computer. And the first universal computer that we have found is the Turing machine. Other models have been found, such as the Wolfram 110 model as well. So, the primer involves a lightweight spaceship which calculates primes. And we can build Turing machines. Well, obviously, because if we can build circuits, we can actually build an infinite Turing machine. How cool is that? We can build Game of Life inside the Game of Life. Because our computers are able to calculate Game of Life, so that means you can build Game of Life in the Game of Life. How cool is that? Now let's talk about how to generalize the Game of Life in case you're just bored about this Game of Life stuff. So one generalization involves autototalistic rules, everything as bx as y, and these are this is just the definition for the outer totalistic rule. X and Y can be sets of numbers, in which case the rules follow according to every single value of X and Y. And there are 262,144 outer totalistic rules. If that's not enough for you, try isotropic ones. And then it takes into account relative position of the cells instead of the number of cells. And to do this, you need to memorize a gigantic lookup table. And then there are a total of 2 to the power of 102 rules. And just to make sure that every one of you getting the point here, here's a short Pikachu face. Got that? Now, software and resources you can use are Live Viewer, Golly, CA Viewer, and Live Wiki. And so basically, Live Viewer is a really good resource. Golly's better, somewhat better. CA Viewer has a really good search program, and Live Wiki is just basically an encyclopedia of every single life pattern. Well, probably not every single, but every known life pattern. And here are a few example rules. Wait, as you can see, I have put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 rules here for you to examine, and then you can create your own rules. That's even better. Now, 2 new rules have been mentioned in journal papers, those being the B6/S567 in 3 dimensions and B3S13 in 2 dimensions, known in the Conway Life community as low life. So, the only reference that I have other than those 2 journal papers is conwaylife.com, which is actually a very authoritative source when you try finding anything related to cellular automata. Unless you're going to one-dimensional ones, then you can look up the MathWorld site, possibly. Anyways, see you in another video.